Prohibition era wasn't just a war on alcohol consumption. It was a war that led to the end of some of America's finest bourbons. Imagine your favorite restaurant stops preparing your favorite dish. Doesn't it hurt, right? Now, imagine that on a national scale. Every restaurant had to stop preparing your favorite dish. This is what happened with the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibits the sale and manufacture of alcohol. This amendment brought about the heartbreak of distilleries shutting down overnight, lost recipes, loss of jobs, and some of the greatest bourbons in history wiped off the shelves, maybe forever. Today, we're bringing back the stories of 10 bourbons from the 1920s that disappeared because of Prohibition. We're exploring their flavors, traditions, and legacies, and hoping to bring them back. Number 10. Old Crow. In today's bourbon world, mention the name Old Crow to the average consumer and you will get a verbal yuck or a confused face, probably asking what that is. It is considered one of those brands that will probably not be able to come back to life again today because past attempts to bring it back have all been unsuccessful. Old Crow Bourbon wasn't just another brand of whiskey. It was a legend we all thought would survive over the years. First produced in early 19th century, it became synonymous with quality and prestige and was used to show these on special occasions. By the late 1800s, Old Crow Reserve was considered a household name in the American whiskey world, earning a reputation as one of the smoothest, most premium brands of its time. This brand was consumed by highbrow individuals such as Ulysses S. Grant, the Civil War hero and U.S. president, who is said to favor this particular bourbon. Historians even note it as his drink of choice during political meetings and very special gatherings. Sadly, Prohibition hit, and 150 plus years later, and we are here telling the rise and fall story of a premium legend. There are a lot of stories as to why this legend could not withstand the test of time. According to the last master distiller at Crow, before National Distillers sold the distillery in 1987, an error was made in the amount of backset returned to the new mash, drastically changing the taste profile and causing a decline in sales and profit. Another popular story associated with why the brand crashed is that Old Crow somehow lost their yeast strain and could never duplicate it. Other conclusions state that no one ever fully discovered what changed in the process and ingredients, but it is commonly agreed upon that the early 1970s, Old Crow changed drastically and for the worse. Number 9. Golden Wedding Bourbon. If you're wondering how this iconic whiskey brand would taste, let's give you an insight. Legends would say it has a grainy, herbal taste with notes of dill pickle and rye on the palate. This finish is spicy and smoky with a hint of banana. Just use your imaginative taste buds to picture all of these together. Why can't we still enjoy all of this beautiful blend of flavors? All thanks to Prohibition. Golden Wedding Bourbon was a standout spirit in pre-Prohibition era. It is a brand with a long history, originating from the distilleries of Pennsylvania. It wasn't just any bourbon, it was a household name in the Northeast, celebrated for its rye-forward flavor profile that balanced smoothness with a spicy kind of flavor that gives it its spike. Apart from being a premium whiskey brand, Golden Wedding's name was often associated with celebrating a union and other grand celebrations, making it a popular wedding gift in the early 20th century. It would interest you to know that this is where it also got its memorable name from. Launched in the late 19th century, Golden Wedding quickly earned the reputation as a premium choice for those looking to toast life's biggest milestones. Its golden label and elegant branding appealed to consumers' eyesights and taste buds, making them appreciate the brand even more. When Prohibition hit, the Golden Wedding brand vanished almost overnight. Even though at some point it was rebranded, investment had gone into it and they had brought it into the market. However, just like almost all whiskey sales, the brand declined earlier than expected. Without legal production, its original recipe and distilling methods were lost to time. While some records suggest bootleggers tried to mimic its profile, none could truly replicate its unique balance of smoothness. The bourbon to mark life's finest hours to date hasn't been recreated. A combination of pure taste, tradition, and artistry has all gone down the drain. Number 8. Cascade Pure Whiskey. Who would have known that what was known as the legendary taste would pave the way for Jack Daniel's we see everywhere today? Cascade Pure Whiskey's success laid much of its groundwork for Jack Daniel's dominance in the Tennessee whiskey market of today. It was one of the first brands to promote the idea of whiskey as pure and smooth, contrary to what people thought the idea of whiskey to be. This whiskey could best be described as being way ahead of its time. Originating in Tennessee under the banner of the Cascade Distillery, it is known for its exceptional smoothness, which involves the process of using a charcoal mellowing technique that sets it apart from competitors. Its flavor profile was a delicate balance of caramel sweetness and gentle, smoky finish. It quickly became a favorite across the country, sought after for its approachable yet refined taste. By the early 20th century, Cascade was considered one of Tennessee's premier whiskeys, competing on the national stage and even earning accolades internationally. But then Prohibition hit, which led to it hitting rock bottom. As the 18th Amendment brought whiskey production to a halt, Cascade Pure Whiskey vanished completely from the market, leaving the upcoming generation to keep guessing its exact taste. The distillery was shuttered, and its once thriving production line went silent. Unlike some brands that found ways to produce medicinal whiskey and remain on the shelves, Cascade was unable to survive Prohibition's strict mandates. Its original recipe, methods, and reputation became a part of whiskey's past glory. With its distinct flavor, a lot of other distilleries set to copy it, but yet could not get the exact taste. Even though this gave birth to the rise of Jack Daniel's, the loss of Cascade Pure Whiskey marked the end of an era for Tennessee whiskey, leaving a gap in the whiskey world that even the revival of the Lincoln County process would not fill. Number 7. Belle of Nelson Bourbon. In its prime, Belle of Nelson Bourbon was a household name for many bourbon drinkers across the Midwest and beyond. It carried a distinct identity, known for being both bold and refined, a whiskey that could be versatile and used in a variety of cocktail recipes. At the height of its popularity, this brand was not just seen as a premium bourbon, but also a symbol of quality craftsmanship. The whiskey's name was inspired by the beauty and elegance of Kentucky's Nelson County, often referred to as the heart of bourbon country. Belle of Nelson Bourbon has a rich, storied past that connects it to both the golden era of American whiskey and the unfortunate disruption brought about by Prohibition. The distillery that produced Belle of Nelson was established in the 19th century in Kentucky, a region famously known for its bourbon-making traditions. The distillery's signature bourbon quickly became a popular taste, which combined classic Kentucky corn-based sweetness with just the right touch of spice from rye. However, like so many other American spirits during Prohibition, Belle of Nelson's bourbon's production came to an abrupt halt in 1920. Under Prohibition laws, all distilleries in Kentucky were shut down, with only a few surviving due to underground work they had to do. Even after Prohibition ended, the Belle of Nelson name never returned to prominence. While many distilleries found a way to relaunch and modernize its operations, leaving us to guess what it would have been like had it survived. Number 6. Old Tailor Bourbon. Hearing the name, One would think it has roots deep in the finest of gems forgotten from the sea. Far from that, the Old Tailor Bourbon is a brand of whiskey produced at Buffalo Trace Distillery in Kentucky by the Sazerac Company. It was named in honor of the historic distiller Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor Jr. The Old Tailor Distillery, located, was among the first distilleries built with tourism in mind. The site featured a castle-like design and sprawling gardens, inviting visitors to experience bourbon making grandly and educationally. Talking about the whiskey itself, the Old Tailor Bourbon was one of the first whiskeys to carry the bottled in bond designation. When asked to describe its taste, the bourbon itself was celebrated for its rich caramel, vanilla, and oak notes, often described as a perfect balance between sweetness and spice. Colonel Taylor himself had pioneered techniques like sour mash fermentation and insisted on aging his whiskey for extended periods to achieve unmatched smoothness and flavor. Although Taylor himself passed away before Prohibition began, his legacy was deeply impacted as the brand's production was halted. The once bustling Castle Distillery became a silent monument to bourbon's golden age. Despite the historic nature of the brand, Old Tailor was not one of the few to receive medicinal whiskey licensing during Prohibition, and the original recipe and process became fragmented and died over time. The distillery has changed hands multiple times, renewing interest in the distillery process, but we are still not certain that this brand would come back to its past glory. Number 5. Hermitage Whiskey. Whiskey lovers would surely describe this as the taste of American heritage if they get to have a taste of it. Renowned for its smooth yet robust taste, Hermitage whiskey became a favorite across the United States during the golden age of whiskey. Its production emphasized careful aging and superior ingredients, which helped it compete with the finest bourbons and whiskeys of the time. Hermitage's distinct balance of sweetness, oak, and a hint of spice made it a preferred choice for whiskey aficionados, whether consumed neat, on the rocks, or in classic cocktails. Shortly after its creation and spread, fine spirit lovers were very disappointed when the Prohibition began in Tennessee in 1910. Whiskey was banned from being produced for 10 years before the federal ban on alcohol in 1920. After years of being banned, the Prohibition was repealed, and spirit lovers everywhere rejoiced. Publicker Distilling Company began to apply its technologies to distill and produce beverage alcohol spirits. In 1933, they formed a subsidiary company, Continental Distilling Corporation, producing Old Hickory bourbons. Even at the time, the original recipe for Hermitage wasn't recovered, and by the time Prohibition ended in 1933, the brand had faded into obscurity, remembered only by whiskey enthusiasts and historians longing for its return. Number 4. Old Continental Whiskey. Old Continental Whiskey, produced by Campbell and Seaman, was known for its distinctive bottle featuring a Continental soldier. The packaging and branding were some of its unique features, apart from its unique taste, of course. The brand thrived until Prohibition in 1920, which forced many distilleries to shut down or sell their stocks. Old Continental Whiskey never successfully returned to the market after Prohibition, as consumer preferences shifted and the brand lost its foothold in a competitive landscape. Today, it is only remembered primarily for its distinctive bottles and historical significance in American whiskey culture. A lot of people do not even know what the taste feels like anymore. Number 3. Green River Bourbon. Green River Bourbon, established in 1885, was popular for its quality and even served as the official whiskey of the U.S. Marine Hospital. The distillery faced many challenges, including a fire outbreak in 1918 that destroyed over 40,000 barrels of whiskey, and the impact of Prohibition, which halted production. Although it was rebuilt after Prohibition ended in 1933, Green River Bourbon struggled to maintain a market presence and finally ceased distribution in 1955. After decades of extinction, the distillery was revived in 2014, and in 2022, Green River Bourbon was reintroduced to the market. Today, it features a mash bill of 70% corn, 21% rye, and 9% malted barley, offering tasting notes of warming spices, cinnamon, and dried cherry. Even with all of these improvements, the taste of the bourbon would never be the same again. Number 2. Old Hickory. Old Hickory Bourbon was established in 1868 in Fayette County, Kentucky by John Robb, originally known as Old Hickory Distillery. The brand was named in homage to President Andrew Jackson, who had a history of distilling whiskey at some point. In 1896, the distillery relocated to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and gained popularity for its quality sour mashing bourbon. However, the onset of Prohibition in 1910 severely impacted production, leading to a decade-long ban before the nationwide prohibition began in 1920. Although Old Hickory attempted a comeback after Prohibition was repealed in 1933 through Publicker Distilling Company, it struggled to regain its former market presence. By the early 1980s, Old Hickory had faded from the scene entirely. Number 1. S.C. Herbst Whiskey. S.C. Herbst's whiskey history is less documented, but it too succumbed to the pressures of Prohibition, failing to reestablish itself afterwards. Established in the 1870s, Herbst began using the Old Fitzgerald name in the 1890s, inspired by a legendary employee, John E. Fitzgerald, who is said to have sampled the finest barrels of bourbon from the warehouse. Herbst sourced its whiskey from Kentucky distillers, particularly favoring pot-stilled bourbon, and marketed it as a premium product. The brand gained traction and was well regarded until Prohibition in 1920 forced Herbst to sell existing stock to Julian P. Van Winkle for medicinal use. After Prohibition ended, the Old Fitzgerald brand was revived under the Stitzel-Weller distillery, but S.C. Herbst whiskey itself did not survive the transition and faded into obscurity as market dynamics shifted and consumer preferences evolved. And with that, our trip back to the 20s has ended. 10 legendary bourbons lost to time because of the Prohibition era. These iconic bourbons left a void when Prohibition shut them down. While some of these distilleries never made it back, even though we wish they did, their legacies live on in the bourbons we know and love today. Which of these do you wish you could taste? Subscribe to our channel to discover more about vintage America.